Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Tiger Pregame Show. I'm your host with the most, Rashad Christian. Joined alongside for this week, Nick Weiler. Nick, how are we doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
You excited?
I'm excited.
All right.
A lot to talk about.
Yeah, a lot of enthusiasm going on right now. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Last week, the Towson Tigers faced off against the visiting Citadel Bulldogs. And after a relatively slow first quarter, which included a touchdown and a field goal, the Tigers jumped out to a lead with a 17-point second quarter en route to a 44-27-point victory in a game that saw Tom Flacco finish with 438 all-purpose yards, including 70-plus yard run. Nick, this Tiger offense looked nearly unstoppable. I mean, what exactly did they do well on the offensive end?
Well, I mean, I think we all knew that Tom Flacco was a mobile quarterback, but I don't know if anyone really predicted that he had this sort of rushing performance in him. I mean, over 180 rushing yards, 2 TDs. You know, when you have a player that can get outside the pocket and escape and make things happen, obviously it only opens up every other aspect of the offense, you know. Shane Simpson was able to break off a long touchdown run. Sam Gallahan, Jabari Allen, they both had long stretch plays down the field that he was able to get them the ball. You know, and credit the offensive line, they opened up some lanes for him to escape and create some plays.
Like when your quarterback is able to be that playmaker for your offense, and like you said, it opens up everything else on the offensive end. And now that's one more thing for the Citadel offense that they had to pay attention to was Tom Flacco rushing out of the pocket and 185 yards on the ground. I mean, just to go along with his two other running backs, I mean, they didn't have bad games. Like, they contributed too, and just sort of a all-around offense that can attack you from every part. The receivers were making their plays, quarterback, of course, making their plays, running backs contributing. They looked great, and it seems like, with the offensive line, sometimes they do collapse, and there's a lot of pressure put on Tom Flacco, but it seems like he's more lethal when that happens because he's almost forced to get out of the pocket on those plays.
I agree, and a lot of times you have quarterbacks that can't handle that type of pressure. If they get, the pocket collapsing on them, they kind of scramble. They either go helter-skelter or they'll get rid of it, force it into coverage. But he seems very poised out there, very collected. He knows when to take off, he knows when to take shots downfield, and I was really impressed with his performance.
Yeah, and on the Citadel end, their running team, like 3 for 16 through the air. It's not great. Jordan Black had to contribute mostly on the ground. They only went 9 for 23 on third downs that game. So the Towson defense, they did have to adjust with that triple option offense, and they did really well. Citadel only got into the red zone twice, despite 27 points on the day. They had to rely on big plays, and even when their lead running back had 180 yards on the ground and 35 attempts, they've been playing from behind since quarter one, and I think that really, kind of propelled Towson throughout the entire game.
Yeah, I mean, Towson was able to get out to an early lead, and especially when you're playing a team like the Citadel that runs it as often as they do, they're not really designed to come from behind. I mean, they did have a couple long running plays. They were able to break a few for a touchdown. But anytime you run the ball 70-plus times in a game, you're going to have some breakout plays. And I thought overall, the front seven of Towson did a pretty good job of containing it, keeping the big plays to a minimum, and even creating some turnovers. We saw the interception with Monty Fenner.
Yeah. And that'll wrap it up for the recap there. When we come back from commercial break, we'll have our very own Sarah Ridenour sat down with Monty Fenner earlier this week to talk about the season so far.
So you had 8 tackles and 1 interception in last week's game. How would you say your performance was against a tough Citadel offense?
I think I performed very well. Triple option offense. Haven't faced that since high school, which is like all eye discipline. They do they'll run heavy, and then they'll pass. So that one time that they tried to pass, it was for interception.
And what have you been working on this week in practice for this game?
Transitioning back to our regular defense. 'Cause, you know, for 2 weeks we was working on just option offenses, and now we're back into the pass game. You know, we didn't work on a lot of pass coverages over the past 2 weeks since we had a bye and then get ready for Citadel. So this week just been back on the footwork technique and playing the pass also.
So they're 4-1 and you guys are 3-1. How do you feel about the matchup, especially with it being a top 25 game?
It's gonna be a grudge match. You know, Stony Brook, we always been, you know, since I've been here, physical. Their defense physical, our defense physical. You know, their offense, you know, used to be like their 60-40 run pass, you know, and how we used to be, but we transitioned to a new offense. So, you know, just playing them, it's gonna be like, I guess, turnovers. It won't go down to the turnovers.
So what do you think makes Stony Brook's offense so difficult?
They're, like I said, they're physical and they like to run. They lead the league in rushing. So that should tell you about how their offensive line is and how their backs are. You know, they run pretty hard. The two backs run pretty hard.
Do you think playing at home will help keep up the momentum from these past 2 wins?
Definitely. Home crowd, you know, always having a home field advantage. You get a better mood. You know, guys be more juiced up. You know, we're playing our home crowd, so we have another chip on our shoulder. Like, not about to let anybody come in here and disrespect us on our home field. So that's always, you know, home field advantage for a reason.
And then how was it for you guys to be able to win last week while you're at home, the first home game, and celebrating 50 years of Towson football?
It was definitely great. All the alumni that came out, you know, we got a big student support. You know, like I said, first home game, so everybody will come to the home game. The new uniforms, you know, definitely got the first win of those, first time trying them on, which is very nice. And, you know, it was just a great atmosphere out here.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming to talk to me today, and good luck this weekend.
When we come back from the break, we'll have the preview for today's matchup against the Stony Brook Seawolves. Welcome back to the Tiger Pregame Show. I'm your host, Rashad Christian, joined alongside Nick Weiler. We talked about the recap for the Tigers game versus the Citadel Bulldogs. Now, moving forward to today, where the Tigers will face the number 13th ranked Stony Brook Seawolves, who come into this game with a 4-1 record on the year, their most recent win being a 29-27 point victory against Villanova, who the Tigers did beat earlier this year. We saw in that game the Seawolves had to pass the ball. They were down 21-0 in the second quarter. Quarterback Joe Carbone had 3 touchdowns on the game. And for a team that primarily runs the ball, averaging 230-plus yards on the ground a game, they can pass when they have to. So for this Tiger defense, are they going to have to focus more on the passing game or the rushing game for the Seawolves?
Well, I think at least initially, they're going to have to focus on the run. It's tough for them, obviously, coming off of a game against the Citadel team that ran the ball 71 times. At least the front seven definitely is a little banged up. Anytime you face that sort of rushing attack, it's going to be a physical challenge. You know, Stony Brook can run the ball also, as you said, and obviously it starts from stopping that. If they can stop that, and I do think that hopefully the Towson offense will give them an early lead and force Stony Brook to sort of air it out. And, you know, the secondary will have to step up as opposed to their more limited role that they had to face last week against the Citadel.
Yeah, so for the Towson defense, is there any one player that we should expect to have a really big game, or is it just going to be a whole defensive effort?
I think it's a whole defensive effort.
Yeah.
Mainly with the secondary, I think it's going to be, you know, transition into a more traditional game plan as opposed to last week's against the Citadel where they had to crowd the line. Secondary really didn't see many action, only 16 passes. They obviously know that Joe Carbone can throw the ball, and I think they're chomping at the bit a little bit. They want to prove that they can step up also and help control the game on their end.
Yeah, and in that Citadel game, they threw 16 times, completed only 3 of them. And one of those passes was an interception. Monty Fenner got the pick. So, I mean, even in limited action, they're staying up, they're staying ready, making plays on the defensive end. And for this Stony Brook offense, again, they run the ball. And their 2 running backs, Donald Leontine and Jordan Gowans, they both have exceptional stats on the year. 78 rushes for Gowans, 572 yards and 4 touchdowns, averaging over 100 yards a game. Is he going to be, do you think, the focus for the Stony Brook offense, or are we going to look towards Joe Carbone?
I think if it were up to Stony Brook, obviously the game would go through Gowans. You know, he's got a lot of big play potential, and I think that they know that the Towson is beat up a little bit physically, and they're really going to try and exploit, you know, just a quick week and really just want to attack that front 7 and sort of wear us down almost how Citadel tried to last week.
Yeah. And on the Stony Brook defensive side, senior defensive lineman John Haggard, he's had himself quite a season. 5 tackles for losses on the year, 3 against Villanova, 2 sacks against Villanova, and a forced fumble against the Wildcats. So he's coming off a pretty hot week. Just to see this Tiger offensive line in action, I mean, sometimes they do collapse, sometimes Flacco, or a lot of the times Flacco does make a play for himself, has to rush out of the pocket because he's not your traditional quarterback. You know, see quarterbacks running for 185 yards, 2 touchdowns while throwing for almost the exact same amount. But just to see that matchup between the offensive line and defensive line, how Haggard and all of those other people on that line get at Tom Flacco and see if they, you know, might maybe place a spy on him, see if that works. I mean, I'm not sure if there was a spy for the Citadel game, and if there was, then obviously it didn't work.
Obviously, yeah. I would be very surprised if Stony Brook didn't at least try and attempt some sort of containment on Tom Flacco. He had a ridiculously explosive game on the ground last week, and I think everyone in the CAA, especially now more than ever, is aware of, you know, his mobility and his big play potential. And
just really quick, on the Towson offensive end, who is going to be a player besides Tom Flacco, because we know what he can do, who's going to be a player to watch?
I think Towson is going to want to get back to the running game. They had a couple big runs. Shane had that touchdown run last week. You know, I think that this week they're really going to try and emphasize the ground game, and I'm looking for Shane Simpson to break out a little bit.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting matchup to say the least. Thank you for joining us here today. I'm Rashad Christian, joined by Nick Weiler. It'll be an interesting matchup against Stony Brook and the Tigers. They've had some really good matchups in the past. See if this game is like history. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.